Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Cole walked through the gate with a faint smile on his face. This would be the first time in a long while that he was coming back from a trip feeling lighter, without another destination lined up or a video call scheduled for the next day. He had just opened the 12th office of the energy company he built from scratch, and this time he was coming back from London. On the way home, he kept thinking about how he'd tell Madeline and the girls that he decided to cut back on work. He wanted to change the routine, leave the office earlier, pick up the kids from school. It was his way of making up for lost time and, more than anything, reconnecting with real life, the kind that starts after work. When he turned the doorknob, he expected the scent of Madeline's perfume, the sound of little feet running across the wooden floor, some cartoon playing in the living room. But all he found was silence. He called out for the girls, no response. He went to the kitchen, empty. He climbed the stairs looking for noise, movement, any sign that someone lived there. The girls' rooms were too neat, as if nobody had slept in them for days. The closet looked incomplete, some clothes and 2 suitcases were missing. And it was in the study that he found what he feared most, an envelope with his name written on it, deliberately placed in the center of the desk. He opened it with trembling hands. Madeline started by saying she hoped he understood. That the past few months had been hard. That she missed him, and more than that, she missed being seen, touched, desired. She confessed she got involved with Travis, the golf instructor at the club, and that it started with innocent conversations. That she didn't plan anything, that it just happened. She said there was no love, that it was a mistake. That she felt confused, guilty, and ashamed, but that it was already too late to undo what was done. She wrote that she was staying with the girls at her parents' house in Napa Valley, giving him space to process everything without having to deal with the girls' questions. The letter sounded like a poorly planned confession, an attempt to ease her guilt by placing the responsibility of deciding what came next entirely on him. Cole dropped the letter on the table. He walked to the bedroom, glanced around the space where he spent so many years with Madeline, and felt like he was standing in a stranger's house. He opened the girls' closet. He saw that some clothes were gone, but many toys remained. He grabbed his phone and called his sister, who lived in San Francisco. He simply said he needed a place to stay with the girls for a few days and promised to explain later. Instead of making any rash decisions, he chose to move carefully. He packed his bags in silence. Her words echoed like dry punches, and though there were no tears, the pain was there, scattered in the corners of the house. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, but the fact that everything had been hidden for months while he gave his best in meetings, contracts, and mergers, believing he was building security for the family. It felt like discovering that while he was building protective walls, someone inside had already opened windows for someone else. Still, he didn't break anything, didn't yell, didn't call her. He understood that any conversation at that moment would be useless. The damage was already done. All that was left was to protect what still made sense, his daughters. And for that, he needed to be strong. Cole spent the following days caught between silence and the need to keep going. He barely slept. When he closed his eyes, images invaded his mind, images he wished not to see, Madeline smiling at another man, holding his hands, surrendering to him. That ate away at him in a way even his worst business failures never managed to. But now he needed to be more than a wounded man, he needed to be a full-time father. The girls were still with their grandparents in Napa Valley, and Cole used those days to organize his next steps, slowly but precisely. Divorce was inevitable, but that didn't mean he would rush through it recklessly. He had already seen too many friends lose themselves in legal battles that destroyed entire families. He didn't want that for his daughters. On a regular afternoon, while waiting for the coffee to finish brewing, he received a call from Andrew, an old acquaintance from the golf club. It was a short, casual conversation, but it changed everything. When Cole briefly mentioned the separation, Andrew let out a seemingly trivial sentence that planted an uncomfortable seed. you were just one more on Travis's list. Cole froze. He asked him to explain. Andrew backed off, said it was better forgotten, that he didn't want to get involved. But it was already too late. That thought wouldn't leave his mind. In the following days, Cole couldn't focus on anything. He kept thinking about what Andrew said and wondering whether Madeline knew who Travis really was, whether she had any idea of the kind of history he carried. And if she didn't know, why did she let herself get involved? With his head full of assumptions, he decided to stop imagining and start acting. He asked for recommendations for a good private investigator and hired a discreet, experienced professional who had already worked for other businessmen in the area. The report arrived in just a few days. Cole spent the whole night reading every line. He discovered that Travis had already been involved with at least 3 other married women from the same club. In 2 of those cases, divorce followed. The information included message records, photos, and even an informal complaint filed with the club administration, which chose to bury it to avoid scandals. The pattern was always the same: he approached during lessons, offered attention and a listening ear, then came the discreet invitations, the secret meetings. Cole felt his stomach churn. Madeline hadn't been the first, and probably wouldn't have been the last. What she thought was emotional connection was likely a recycled script. She didn't fall into a trap out of naivety. She gave in. She knew it was wrong, but she went ahead anyway. Even faced with this new pain, Cole stayed focused. He would use this wisely. He took the material to his lawyer, a professional known for ethics and firmness. The plan was to proceed with the divorce, using the evidence strategically. No exposing Madeline or ruining her image in front of the girls. But this was enough to protect his own rights, ensure the girls would spend more time with him, at least until things could be calmly discussed again once the dust settled. The lawyer agreed with the approach and began preparing the documents. Throughout this process, Cole constantly thought about the girls. They were in Napa, probably hearing softened versions of the truth. And he knew that sooner or later, he would have to tell them his side of the story, adapted to their age. He didn't want them to grow up hating their mother, but he also wouldn't allow them to confuse loyalty with passivity. They needed to understand that forgiveness is a choice, but respect is a duty. One Saturday night, while visiting his sister's house, he sat with her on the porch and shared part of what he had discovered. She listened carefully, with the firm expression of someone who felt anger but avoided fueling it for him. When he finished, she simply said, "You'll come out of this with your head held high. It will hurt, but it will shape you." It was a simple phrase, but it echoed in his mind. In a way, it was true. Every pain well fought shapes us. And Cole was already changing without realizing it. In the following days, he scheduled a phone conversation with Madeline. She answered in a low tone, sounding embarrassed. He got straight to the point: the divorce was inevitable. Madeline tried to argue, cried, begged him to reconsider, but Cole remained firm. He told her he wouldn't make a scandal, that he would protect her image in front of the girls, but that this was the end. He simply asked her to prepare the girls because he would go pick them up. She agreed, defeated. Her voice sounded like someone only now beginning to grasp the extent of the damage she caused. He hung up and stared at the phone for a while. He took a deep breath and, for the first time in weeks, slept for several hours straight. Without nightmares. Without questions. Just the necessary emptiness to keep moving forward. The divorce process moved forward with surgical precision. Cole, supported by a well-written prenuptial agreement and the irrefutable evidence gathered by the investigator and Madeline's confession letter, handed over all the necessary documents to his lawyer like closing a business contract, without anger, without haste, but with a level of seriousness that impressed even those used to handling separations. The difference this time was that it wasn't a company at stake. It was his own life. Madeline, upon being officially notified, signed the papers with an empty expression. She looked worn down, exhausted inside, like someone who already knew there was nothing left to save. Despite the weight of what she had done, she wasn't left without support. The prenuptial agreement guaranteed her a significant sum, along with one property and part of the company's shares separated judicially by mutual agreement. She maintained the standard of living she was used to, with enough financial stability to move forward without depending on anyone. The difference was that all of this now came accompanied by a loneliness she built word by word, gesture by gesture. Cole, on the other hand, didn't seek revenge or recognition. He avoided public comments, refused to discuss the matter with close colleagues. He preferred to preserve the dignity of the process. His only real concern was centered on the girls. During the time they stayed with Madeline in Napa Valley, he called every day, kept up with their routines from afar, checked their homework through video calls. When he finally picked them up, they hugged him with a different kind of strength, as if they sensed, even without understanding all the details, that something had changed. Back at his sister's house, Cole re-established the routine with a lightness that surprised those who only knew him as an executive. He made sure to take them to school, prepare breakfast, watch cartoons with them on Sundays. And in these simple gestures, he rediscovered a piece of himself he had left behind years ago. One day, while waiting for his younger daughter to finish ballet class, he was approached by a lady who often saw him there, quiet, watching patiently. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, a widow with a gentle voice and a sharp gaze. She sat beside him and, without hesitation, said she admired his constant presence. She mentioned that she knew many fathers who, after a divorce, became visitors in their children's lives. But he seemed different. Cole smiled gratefully. He didn't talk much. He just said he needed to be more than a weekend dad. That unexpected conversation made him realize how much his public image had changed. He wasn't just the CEO with a private jet and an office in New York anymore. Now he was also the man who cared, who chose to be present, who was relearning how to be a full-time father. Meanwhile, Madeline faced the other side of the coin. She continued living in the same house the couple bought in San Jose, but the rooms felt too big. The parties she used to throw frequently disappeared. When she went out, she felt eyes weighing heavily on her shoulders. Stories about Travis began circulating, how he had gotten involved with other married women, how he had taken money to stay quiet. Some of her friends, even without directly saying so, gave subtle signs of suspicion, as if waiting for her to fully accept the role of the villain. Madeline tried to join new circles, but she didn't fit in. The guilt, even with all the money, left a trail difficult to erase. The only thing she preserved with dedication were the visitation times with the girls. She made sure to pick them up punctually, prepared their favorite meals, bought books, helped with homework. It seemed like an effort to compensate for the mistake with presence. The girls, although young, felt the tension between their parents, but also saw the effort both put in to keep things as normal as possible. Cole never spoke badly of Madeline in front of them. When one of the girls asked why he and her mom no longer slept in the same house, he replied that sometimes, even when two people love each other deeply, they can follow different paths. The girl stayed silent, then smiled and hugged him. With time, Cole also stopped going to the club. He swapped golf lessons for morning hikes. He stopped attending social events and focused on work only during office hours. His office now followed more human hours. Meetings ended earlier, lunches were replaced with walks with the girls. He relearned how to cook, how to organize birthdays at home, how to help with schoolwork. Instead of nights in five-star hotels, he started planning trips with the girls to simpler places, with trails, lakes, and bicycles. He wasn't trying to erase the past, but to rebuild a future where he could feel whole again. Even with everything he had lost, he knew he had something of immeasurable value in his hands. And protecting that became his daily mission. A few months had passed since the divorce was finalized. The routine was more balanced, the girls seemed adjusted to the new dynamics, and Cole was starting to feel a strange calm. It was a peace that came slowly, without big celebrations, simply marked by the absence of chaos. He no longer woke up with a heavy chest. He had gotten used to the idea that life doesn't always follow the expected script. The pain that once filled everything was now just a shadow trailing behind him. It was still there, but it no longer dictated his steps. It was on a regular afternoon, while organizing some school papers for the girls, that he received an unexpected message. It was from Madeline. She wanted to talk. Not on the phone. She wanted to see him in person. She said she needed to say something while looking into his eyes. He hesitated before replying. He thought about refusing, but eventually accepted. They agreed to meet at a quiet park, away from familiar eyes. When he arrived, Cole saw her sitting on a bench, holding her hands tightly, like someone fighting against her own anxiety. Madeline looked thinner, her face tired. When he approached, she lifted her eyes, and for a moment, the two remained silent. There was no intimacy between them anymore, but there was a shared history. And that alone justified the meeting. She got straight to the point. She said she wasn't there to ask for reconciliation, that she knew she had broken something that couldn't be rebuilt with words. She simply wanted to apologize, not for the act alone, but for everything. For letting loneliness make decisions instead of maturity. For mistaking need for freedom. For creating an emptiness where a family once stood. Cole listened without interrupting. There was no anger in his eyes. There was a safe distance between them, built from pain but also from respect. When she finished, he simply said that he had already forgiven her. That he spent a lot of time trying to understand why, but concluded that some choices appear when we lose ourselves. And that she seemed to have gotten lost. Madeline quietly cried. He let her finish, then stood up and said that was enough. It was over. Life would continue in separate directions. But she was still the girl's mother. And that required a kind of bond that didn't depend on romantic feelings. It required maturity. She nodded silently. That meeting didn't bring back what was lost, but it restored dignity to both of them. It was the necessary final mark that allowed each of them to move forward without carrying the weight of silence. After that day, they no longer exchanged long messages. Only communications about the girls, brief and kind. Madeline seemed calmer in the following weeks. She started picking up the girls more often, helped with homework, attended school meetings. Cole observed everything from a distance, without judgment. He knew that true regret changes behavior. And slowly, she showed that. As he rebuilt his life with the girls, Cole also reorganized his priorities. He started working fewer hours, invested in a small tech company focused on sustainability, and decided to pay more attention to the human side of business. His reputation as an unrelenting executive gave way to a more balanced image. Employees even began commenting that he seemed like a different man. And indeed, he was. The scars he carried became his compass. During a business trip to Seattle, while passing through a restaurant in the hotel lobby, someone called his name. It was Mark, a former employee from the golf club who now worked there. They talked for a few minutes, recalling old situations, until Mark casually mentioned something that made Cole's world spin. Unaware of the direct connection to Cole's past, Mark said that Travis had been fired for reasons beyond inappropriate relationships. He explained that Travis intentionally targeted married women, and once the affairs progressed, he started threatening them with exposure. In exchange, he demanded favors, expensive gifts, even money. Mark said he heard strange stories from at least 2 women who went through this, but none wanted to file an official report out of fear of public exposure. The club preferred to pay severance and cover everything up discreetly. Cole froze. This brought a new perspective to everything he had lived. For the first time, he considered the possibility that Madeline had, in part, been manipulated. Maybe not from the very beginning, but somewhere along the way with Travis, she might have felt pressured, cornered, trapped by a man who knew exactly where to push. He remembered the letter she wrote, the confusion in her tone, her attempt to explain without seeming defensive. Perhaps she hadn't fully understood what she had gone through. Perhaps she was afraid to admit how vulnerable she had become. During the flight back, Cole remained completely silent. He reflected on everything he didn't know. He didn't look for Madeline to confront her. He didn't dig further into the past. He knew that even if he had the complete truth, it wouldn't change the facts. The marriage was over. The consequences existed. But something inside him changed. He began to view the story with more compassion. She made a mistake. But maybe she was too hurt to act clearly. Maybe she was lonelier than he imagined. On an ordinary night, sitting at the table with his daughters, while one talked about a school project and the other asked for help with math, Cole smiled. He realized that the love he built with them survived any storm. That was what mattered. After putting them to bed, he went to his room, opened the notebook where he used to write thoughts, and wrote something that needed no editing. Not every betrayal begins with desire. Sometimes it starts with silence. He closed the notebook, turned off the light, and slept with a clear conscience. Because in the end, what he built with honesty, no one could destroy. Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.